Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. We are here with Ashley Herring Blake, who is the author of our December book, my blur background, Make the Season Bright. Ashley Herring Blake is an award-winning author and teacher. She loves coffee, cats, melancholy songs, and happy books. She is the author of the young adult novels Suffer Love, How to Make a Wish, and Girl Made of Stars, and the middle grade novels Ivy Aberdeen's Letter to the World and The Mighty Heart of Sunny St. James. She's also the author of the Bright Falls series, a trilogy of adult romance novels.
Yeah.
Delilah Green doesn't care, Astrid Parker doesn't fail, Iris Kelly doesn't date, and of course, make the season bright. So, thank you so much for being here. Sapph-Lit is very much obsessed with the Bright Falls series. So, we were so excited to have Make the Season Bright be our December pick. It came out right at the perfect time for the holidays. So, yeah, thank you again for joining us.
No, thanks for having me.
Alrighty. So congrats on publishing Make the Season Bright. No small
Thank
feat.
you.
What was the publishing process like for you with specifically a holiday romance? This is also, I think, your first standalone adult romance.
hmm
So how is that different from publishing the Bright Falls series? Just walk me through it all.
Right. So publishing a holiday book is actually kind of weird because, first of all, writing it, I wrote it in the summer. So it's like I'm writing all this Christmas stuff in the summertime. So I'm like, do I listen? I have a strict no Christmas music policy until, the night of Thanksgiving, really. So, which, most people do.
Yeah.
But I was like, do I listen to Christmas music to get into I can't even remember what I did, honestly, but it was a little
Hmm.
strange, like writing that in July. And so that was one part that was weird. And then, um, the other part that was just different than any other book really is that selling a holiday book and people buying a holiday book is very different because it's like it comes out in October
Yeah.
and a lot of people do buy it then, like right when it comes out. But they don't read it. So I got a lot of like, oh, I can't wait to read this in 2 months. And I'm like, okay, fair. I get
I'm
it.
saving this
I
for the
would
perfect moment.
I wouldn't be reading it either.
Mhm.
Like when I did events right around the release, most people were like, well, I'm still in my witch era right now. I'm like, that's yes, that's fair.
Mhm.
Because it was October. And so that was a little strange. So it was like, it came out and I did events for the release, and then it was just like nothing really
Hmm.
until Thanksgiving. And then it just like
Exploded.
blew up, yeah, with
Yeah.
all like people tagging me and stuff, and posts on Instagram and stuff like that. So that was just very different from where as usually you release a book and it's like a lot for a few weeks and then it
Hmm.
kind of dies down, whereas this was like
Yeah.
like
It was
very,
a bell
yeah,
curve versus like
yes,
bam. Yeah,
yes, yes,
starting at the peak.
yeah, so the release was very different for me, but it was fun because it was like, oh, it's like exciting when it first comes out, and then and I was working on other books as well during the time,
Hmm.
and then it was like fun to kind of go through a holiday season with a holiday book.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was fun. Um, it is a standalone, which I really enjoyed.
Hmm.
The Brightfall series really wasn't it was my first series I've ever written, so and it's like loosely connected, but it definitely is interesting to write a series because like whatever I wrote in Delilah, which I knew it was going to be a series, I knew it was going to be Astrid next and then Iris, but I didn't really know what their stories were going to be yet. I definitely didn't know. And so,
Hmm.
but whatever I wrote in Delilah was canon. Like you can't, once
Yeah.
it hits the shelves, you can't change it. So, especially by the time I got to Iris, that was interesting because I was like, I
Yeah.
had to make some changes for Iris based on how I'd already set her up. Like she owned a paper shop, and I was like, this is boring. Like, what am I gonna do with this? Like nothing.
Yeah,
So I
you
had her
have these
close
kind
it.
of like narrow rails
Yeah,
that you kind of have to follow in
yeah,
certain ways.
yeah. Like I had many very various boring ideas about her, like making a planner for someone famous, and like I was like, this is awful. So I was like, you know what? She's gonna close this shop down and become a romance author. So it's like. Whereas if you write a standalone, every time you start a new standalone, you get to start
Yeah.
from scratch and
Yeah.
you can make it whatever you want it to be. Like with Make the Season Bread, I didn't have to worry about who I made any of those characters be or do or say or think because I didn't have to continue their story in the next book. And so there's a lot of freedom in that. it's looking even more appealing as I'm writing my current series. I'm in the second book of my current series that's coming out. The first book's coming out in May. Um, and the second book has proven quite challenging. So I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? Making Season Bright was
Hmm.
so joyful and simple. Um, I mean, any book is hard and any book is different, but it's just, yeah. So there's definitely some differences with a standalone
Yeah.
and a series.
So your new series, the first one is Dream on Ramona Riley, right? Okay,
Hmm.
I'm
Yep.
a few chapters into that currently. It's my current
Okay.
read. So I didn't know it was going to become a series. So very excited to hear that.
It is. Just be aware that whatever you read about April's background in this book is not accurate, okay, in the arc, because
Noted.
I had to change her. I mean, she's personality wise, she's still the same, but like her backstory, kind of like
Yeah,
romantic
the
backstory,
details.
I had to completely change it in edits, like after the arc was already printed, because I was just like, this is not working with the
Yeah,
book, because I'm writing her book right now. But now she's fine, but it
that's
does
so
change.
fair. So for holidays specifically, I grew up very Christian and Christmas was like a big deal. And then when I left the church, I was like, bah humbug, I'm not so festive.
Yeah.
Which is like my own thing to deal with. But I don't read a lot of holiday romance. This is like the first holiday romance I've read since the last holiday romance Sapph-Lit read together, which was Kiss Her Once for Me, Alison Cochrane.
Hmm.
Great book.
Yep.
Um, and I'm so curious about like why holiday romance. Um, do you have any favorite like holiday memories that you really tapped into for this? Like, what was that kind of like spark of inspiration?
Hmm. Well, I also grew up quite Christian, and then I also left the church completely.
Woo!
Yes, and so growing up, there was definitely like a religious component to it for me,
Yeah,
but there was always commercially something separate for me that I really loved. I
yeah,
just loved the lights and the coziness and like basically
yeah,
any Christmas song that did not talk about Jesus. Um, just all the secular ones.
yeah.
And
Mariah
so it just kind
Carey,
of
Slay.
became. Yeah. And then like as I kind of got older, I like got into tarot and I got into, it kind of became like more of a solstice celebration kind of thing. And so,
I love that.
um, but I've always had like very strong, like kind of just like, I don't know, just like soft, cozy feelings around the holidays. Like my family, my partner's very, very into it. Like it's not religious at all for us, but just the whole, traditions, movies, like we watch like the same movies every year. I've seen Home Alone probably every year since it came out, which I think was
Amazing.
like 89 or something. Home Alone 2, just as good, by the way.
Hmm.
So, just like we just watch all these movies every year. There's just, we have a lot of decoration. Our Christmas tree is still up, though it doesn't have
It's
ornaments.
gorgeous, by the
We did get
way.
the ornaments off yesterday and we're getting rid of it today, but we were out of town for New Year, so we're a little behind. Um, but yeah, so I think I just read some holiday books that I really love, like Kiss Her Once for Me.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember what was like, yes, I want to do this. Because I knew I probably, the whole, like I've said, the whole writing of it was not a Christmas experience because I was writing it
Yeah,
in
it
the
was
summer.
a summer.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think I just wanted, I think it just felt right to do it then as like it would be coming out after Bright Falls, before a new series started. It was just a good spot for it. And I feel like it's kind of one of those things that as an author, I just wanted to have one. I just wanted to have a
Yeah.
holiday romance. Like I've had questions like, are you going to write another one? And I'm like, absolutely not. Um,
You're like, this is
just because
it. This is all you're
it's
gonna
just
get.
so niche. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like also like it was like something that we had to like think about with publishing and like the timing and stuff because like I've already talked about how the release was strange, not strange, bad, but just different, from a regular non-holiday book release. And obviously now I expect sales to plummet, as they should, because no, everyone, Christmas is over, we're done, we're not reading holiday books. Um, so that's how we kind of like thought, okay, well, let's, if I can write it in time, let's launch the next one in May. So we kind of keep
Yeah.
those sales momentum. But, so it's just like all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I'm glad I did it. I loved writing it. I love Charlotte and Brighton. I loved their story. But yeah, it was just kind of something that I just wanted to have.
Yeah. No, like a kind of
One
palate
of.
cleanser in between
Yeah,
series. No, I love that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
can you share a little bit about your writing process and routine? Like, did you like I know you wrote this in the summer, and of course, it's so different from approaching a series or trilogy. Like, how does your writing process differ from this standalone to the series that you're working on? And what does that look like in your day?
Yeah. I mean, the process isn't really all that different from a standalone, especially, I mean, from a series, especially if, because if this was a series, it would have been the first book. So all these characters
Hmm.
would have been new anyway. Um, so there was really no big difference in terms of the actual creation of it. I, I, I am blessed to have been able to leave my day job last year. So I work from home now. I write full time. So, and I like writing in the morning. So I usually get up in the morning um, and I just write to a word count. I have a program that kind of I put a deadline in and it tells me how many words I need to write a day. Sometimes I go over that. I do try to hit it at least every day, but so I just plug along. I'm pretty diligent in terms of my
Mm,
routine. Like unless I'm traveling or there's some big reason why I can't, I'm sick or something.
yeah.
Once I start drafting a book, I write every day.
Yeah.
Weekends included, 7 days a week. Um, so yeah, and I tend to write pretty complete drafts. A, if you're out there, I'm sure there's some writers in the book club. There's a Most people give people advice, just finish the book. Just turn off your inner editor and keep writing. It doesn't care if it's crappy. It doesn't matter if it's crappy. It doesn't matter. Just That's what edits are for. All first drafts are bad. Um, I do not adhere to that. My inner editor is constantly going while I draft. And that works for me. And it took me a while, to figure that process out. But I'm just like, I can't move on if I know like I need to add this or this dialogue is not complete. Or
Yeah.
very rarely will I put in something that just says like add dialogue here and then move on. Like I would say 1% of the time does that happen. Because I just can't, I'm a very linear writer too. I do not write out of
Mm.
order. I have some friends who are like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go write all the fun scenes first. And I'm like, well, how do you know what they're feeling or saying or thinking
Hmm.
halfway through the book if you haven't written the first half first? And again, it works for them. Everybody's different. Um, but because I'm so linear, I have to know, like, if the first sex scene doesn't hit till 50,000 words, I have to know every emotion that leads up to that sex scene. So I can't just
Yeah.
dive into the sex scene
Yeah.
and write it without all the emotions leading up to it, and how they got there.
No, that makes so much
So yeah.
sense.
And
Yeah.
if I know if something doesn't feel right, I will go back and change it. If I like the book I'm writing right now, like I knew I needed to add this whole new element that would kind of affect almost every scene. And I was probably
Hmm.
halfway through the whole book, but I had to go back. I had to stop and go back and add that part in before I could move on. Because I was like, I don't know. I need to see how they process this news and this
Yeah.
event, to understand how to write past it. So yeah. So
Yeah.
I very much have an inner editor that works. And so by the time I get done with a draft, it's pretty complete. It definitely needs editing, but um, it's not a mess. I'll say
Yeah.
that.
It's not a
So
shitty first draft.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And speaking of sex scenes, well, you started as a YA and middle grade book writer and then jumped into adult romance. So, what was the impetus there? Why are you like, I'm gonna write some spicy stuff?
um, yeah, I mean, I started in YA because at the time I loved reading YA.
Yeah.
And I think at the time also it was kind of like my only straight book is my first book. And that's the only thing. That's the only book I've ever written that has nothing gay in it whatsoever. Um, because around that time was when I was kind of figuring myself out as well.
Yeah.
And so I think really right around that time, I was like, one, I started because I loved YA, and two, after that, I was also like, I want to write books that I needed as a
Yeah.
teenager. Um, so that maybe I wouldn't have taken this long to really kind of be more self-aware. And then, so I wrote two more YAs. And then at that point, I was like, well, I want to kind of shift gears and write middle grade because I loved middle grade as well. And I definitely wanted to kind of pour into at the time, sparse canon
Yeah.
of queer middle grades. And so I did that and I wrote three middle grade. And I think by the time I got done with the last one, which was a very challenging book, Hazel Blind and Deep Blue Sea, and I still love it. But it was a hard book to write, and I think at that point I was like, and these are not like fluffy books. Like My Kid
Yeah.
Lit is not, they're not light and fluffy. Um, they deal with some pretty heavy stuff. And so it was just like, I think I had just said everything I wanted to say. I'd had
Yeah.
plans to go back to YA. I even had a completely full draft of a book that I did sell to my publisher, HMH, Houghton Mifflin, and then my editor left, and I was like, never mind. So, because I
Oh,
hadn't signed the
yeah.
contract yet, so we
Mm,
pulled it because I was like, because they were kind of a mess at the time. They're better now, but this was like in
yeah.
2017 and 18. So,
It wasn't the home for it.
um, no, and I didn't really care to find a home for it. So it was kind of a little bit of like, well, what do I do now?
Mhm.
Or what do I want to do? And then I finished my third middle grade and was like, I want to write an adult. And it actually took me a while to figure out what kind of adult, because I like reading
Mm,
all kinds of adult books. I didn't know if I wanted to do romance or if I wanted to do something just more contemporary
yeah.
or, even more literary. Um, and then the pandemic hit and I was like, well, okay, I'm writing romance then because I just needed something. I mean, as we all
You
do. I mean,
needed joy.
everybody has a pandemic book, and Delilah Green Doesn't Care was mine. So, and yeah, I think that, and even after Delilah, I still kind of was like, okay, I'm gonna dip back into YA, and then it just never happened. And I just
Mhm.
finally realized, I was just like, I don't want to write that POV anymore because I feel like I had said everything I wanted to say and needed to say to that age group, if that makes sense.
Mm,
Um, my last YA, for anyone who's read Girl Made of Stars, was a very heavy book, but it was also, I kind of feel like I was like, that's it. I have nothing else to say to teenagers. It was
yeah.
like my opus to young people. And so, and then, when I dived into adult, I was like, so fun because I can write sex scenes and I can have as much, you know, just messy adult behavior as I want. And they're
100%.
adults and they
And
have
we're
to own
here
it.
for it.
And so, yeah. And I mean, I'm always going to write disaster characters because that's who I like to read about. But yeah. And so then once I kind of got, and Delilah's publication, really just changed my life.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's where I am. I mean, I'm definitely like looking at dabbling in other genres, but I don't think I know I won't go back to
Yeah. I
anything
mean,
but
it
adult at
it
this
really
point.
sounds
So
like you wrote books for like the different versions of the queer child and teenager
yeah,
that you couldn't fully embody, and that you lived those experiences through your books, and now you're in adult queer life.
I'm an
So that's
adult.
that's what you're
Yeah.
writing.
So that's what I want to
Yeah.
explore. I mean, granted, my characters are still quite younger than I am, but eventually I'll get the age up there, in a character. But right now I'm kind of I'm a geriatric millennial or a very young Gen Xer. So I'm kind of like right on the line there. And most of my characters are solidly millennials. And I'm like, I need to
Yeah.
up
No,
the age a
I'm
little bit.
I'm a cusper. I call myself a grandma Gen Z or like a baby millennial. Like I'm
Yeah.
97. I don't know where that goes. Um
Yeah. Yeah.
so this is also your first second chance romance, and second chance romance are so often hard for me to read because
Hmm.
when once I'm done with someone in my personal life, I'm like, snip, snip, you're done, out. I never see you again, which is like very much against the
Are you a
sapphic
fire sign?
stereotype. No, I'm a Libra, so I'm a grudge
Okay.
holder.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay.
a
Mm.
strong grudge holder. Everyone in my
Yeah.
life will attest to that.
Yeah.
But that's like so against the sapphic stereotype of never getting over your ex, hooking up with your ex,
Right.
etc. Um, and I'm so curious because you did it so well. How did you approach balancing, like acknowledging and addressing that breakup trauma while also keeping the story romantic and sexy and fun? Because I imagine it's so difficult to write a relationship that has all of this history and backstory versus these new ones like the Bright Falls series where they're meeting each other for the first time and you get to really kind of start from scratch. Like, So, how did you approach it, and what's essential in your eyes to pulling off the second chance romance trope?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why I haven't written it yet because it is hard. And honestly, I read it a lot and I'm like, I don't buy this. Or there's something missing, And so like I
Yeah,
didn't write it for a while because I was just like, eh. I think it's a hard trope to write because you have to convince the reader of the love they did have.
yeah,
Um, but at the same time, the reader wants to walk along with them falling in love anew. And so
mm,
it's like you have to make it feel fresh but at the same time, believable that they were together and why they broke up, and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, I picked like the most dramatic and traumatic
left at the altar.
possible scenario, yeah, for the breakup.
Hmm.
And so I mean, I don't really know where these ideas come from. There's just like a million different things. I think this book actually started out as because I think I had started writing it maybe before Iris was completely finished, and it was supposed to
Mm.
be, or I'd started like with the idea for it, and it was going to be a fake dating. Someone brings someone home
Oh
for the
yeah,
holidays. But then Iris ended up being fake dating, and I was like, I can't do two back-to-back tropes, the same thing. So and slowly, just this kind of like Scrooge character came to mind. Why is she like this? Okay, well, she had a shitty mom and also was dumped at the altar. Okay, let's work with that.
yeah,
Um, but then it was like the whole, so yeah, it was, and it was kind of like, well, this could have been like a now then timeline. But
mm,
with a now then timeline, you have to completely have a full complete arc for the then, if that makes
yeah,
sense. And it was like I didn't have that much to write, so I just kind of did it in flashbacks.
hmm,
Um, and so the flashbacks are really where I kind of like hopefully hold the reader along to understanding because I think really the part that was maybe hard to believe was like why in the hell would Charlotte ever forgive Brighton for this and get back together
yeah,
with her? I
yeah,
mean, it was a pretty big betrayal, and so I think the tricky part was really digging into why they had gotten where they had gotten. Like why had Brighton
yeah.
done what she did? Um, and some people still aren't gonna like
Yeah,
it
because
and be like,
Charlotte's
absolutely not. And
far
that's
from
fine.
perfect herself. Like they're both like
Yeah,
avoidant personalities in very different ways that created these
yeah,
like faking it and miscommunications that
yeah.
led to that happening. And no, I mean I loved it, and I usually hate second chance romances.
Yeah, I mean, it was tricky and then I had to like really think, okay, well, how are they going to fall in love now again? Like,
Yeah.
what's like, and so that's why I put them in this situation. It always helps me with those kinds of things if I give them, like, I kind of think of a book as like a body, and it's like the skeleton is kind of the external thing that's happening, so
Mm,
it's the bones that kind of holds
hmm.
up the whole book. So the two turtle doves dating thing was kind of the
Yeah.
skeleton that carried all the emotional goo of the rest of the body.
Yeah.
And so it was like, so that helped me order it in my brain. Like kind of giving them an external thing to be doing while they
Yeah.
interacted or whatever. So,
And also,
um,
it was cuffing season, and the holidays are so nostalgic, and they really cherish
yeah,
that time together because Charlotte's mom. And no, it like having a second chance romance and a holiday romance together, I think really matched up very well.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So
Well,
I want to talk about music because both Brighton and Charlotte are musicians, and in reading your book, and there are a few others like it, like there's Not Another Love Song by Julie Soto and The Heart Principle by Helen Huang, where they have these like string musician main characters. And in reading those and yours, there's clearly this either very personal understanding of music, or you just did a shit ton of research because the translation from like such a like oral, like AURAL
hmm
medium to reading it on the page, it's it's just so interesting and beautiful to read. So I'm curious, like what music were you listening to? And what like do you play any instruments? Like what was that like?
yeah, so I did not do a shit ton of research. A little bit on the violin, but I do have a musical background. I was
Mhm.
actually I was a chorus girl. I was a musical theater girl in high
Same.
school, and then in high school, I mean, in the college, I was in choir all 4 years. I played guitar. I taught myself how to play guitar in uh, college, and then I did actually did kind of a singer-songwriter thing in Nashville for a few
Mm.
years,
Oh,
um,
wow.
and in the Atlanta area before I moved to Nashville with a friend of mine to college with. So we had kind of like a duo where we both played guitar, we both wrote, we both sang. Um, we made a very bad album. It's just like it was fun. It was in my 20s. I absolutely am glad I did it. I absolutely hated the singer-songwriter life, like just and I mentioned, and I use that experience a lot to talk about Brighton's kind of
Yeah.
experience in Nashville. I didn't have a band who went viral, once they dumped me, but I did have some experience in Nashville trying to book gigs and just like the hamster wheel
Yeah.
of being in a town where it's great to network with, but unless you're like Chapel Rowan or someone, it's gonna be it's a terrible place to play because everyone's a musician and everyone is good. Um, so anywhere you walk in to get on stage, there's gonna be at least half the crowd is also a musician and is looking at you like, let's see
Why
what
are
you
you
got.
here? Yeah.
Yeah, kind of thing. So, I pulled on that experience for Brighton quite a bit. So yeah, and then with Charlotte, I don't play violin at all. So I did have to, kind of look up a few things about that. I looked up some like more contemporary like quartets kind of thing
Mm.
on Spotify and listened to a little bit of that just to kind of get a feel for what like the Rosalind Quartet might sound like. Um I am like usually very, very opposed for like entire song lyrics to be listed in books because I'm like, this is never gonna come across the way the author hears it in their head.
Yeah.
So like when I put that's why the entire lyrics for that December Light song are not in the book because I'm like, I am not writing an
You're not
entire
writing a song.
song. Yeah. I just needed enough lyrics to kind of capture the emotions of what it was about. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was mostly my own experience and my own kind of artistic slant for how I kind of threw them together.
That's so interesting that you have a songwriting background and ended up being a full-time author. Is like,
Yeah.
do you find
Yeah.
any similarities between writing songs and writing
Um,
books?
I mean, it's creation, like I was
Yeah.
always good at lyrics and I was good at arranging.
Mm.
I was horrible at melodies. My partner was much better at melodies than I was. Theirs were just always so hooky and great, and mine were just like, ugh. And that's fine. I didn't have to be great at it. But yeah, so, but it's all telling a story, really.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I didn't pursue it longer than I did just because I just hated I was like, I didn't like the traveling a ton. Like, I do like to travel, but like when I want to and not when I feel like
Yeah.
I
On your
have
own
to kind of
terms.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot of that. I'm kind of a homebody, so I was like, this is not something
Yeah.
that I want to be doing
No,
long
don't you don't want to
term.
be you don't want to be in the rat race.
Writer is
I
perfect. I don't have to talk to anybody. I can just sit at my desk.
I no, it's literally an introvert's dream job.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
And then every now and then I get to come on with things like this and get
Yeah,
my extroverted energy out, which is very,
exactly.
very small and limited.
I'm
Yes.
the same. No, literally, that's how I use Sapph-Lit. It's
Yeah.
like, reading a book throughout the month, and then, oh, we're gonna have one little day of extroversion, and then we go back into
Yeah.
hibernation. Um,
Exactly.
so I
Yes.
think this is also your first bi for bi romance. And as a
Mm-hmm.
bisexual myself, I adore bi for bi romance. And I feel like we need so much more of it. Um, I'd love to know what felt different for you writing two bisexual characters and like a bi for bi relationship as compared to your other books.
Yeah. Um, Honestly, not much. I mean, I don't think it's very different because I think with any romance you're writing, someone falling in love with a person.
Mm,
So I think the thing that would be different was like, their history, which Brighton and Charlotte didn't have a very varied history romantically, other than
yeah.
each other because they'd been together for so long. I think it comes into play like Dream On Ramona Raleigh is also bi for bi, and that's a little
Hmm.
different because both of those main characters definitely have men in their past who
Mm,
play a certain role, or have just with their history. So I think it has to do with more just like what has the character experienced. Um, and because like when they're falling in love, I don't think that it's like, oh, they don't like they're not like, Charlotte and Brighton or Ramona and Dylan in the next book, they're not falling in love with each other thinking I'm a bisexual, falling in love with a bisexual. They just think I'm falling in love with this person, and so
mm,
so I think it has to do more with again just their romantic history or even not history, just like how they talk about their own queerness, like if that's a
yeah,
conversation that is had. Um, so because obviously you don't have to have an actual history to be whatever your identity is. But I think if you have a conversation about it, it's going to color that, obviously. And just kind of thinking through all of that and how a bisexual would definitely talk about their identity differently than a lesbian would.
yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And with your Bright Falls trilogy, we were so firmly in the place of that small town, and I'm seeing a little preview of that in Ramona Riley. But for the standalone, we jump from New York to Nashville, and then we spend a lot of time in Colorado. And this is the first time those FMC, like those main characters, are going into that setting and they're unfamiliar with it, just as the reader is unfamiliar with it. Versus kind of, with Bright Falls, the characters are like grounded and rooted there and like they know
Hmm.
that that's their place.
Yeah.
How do you navigate setting up place in the novel with the characters discovering, Colorado for themselves for the first time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it helps just to make it up. Like Bright Falls is fictional, obviously. Winter River in Make the Season Bright is fictional. Whereas obviously Nashville and New York are not fictional.
Hmm.
Um, but so I think I think a lot of it is really just painting the picture of the scene. Like what is like even in Bright Falls, the first time you see Delilah walk into the bar in the first chapter. Is that the first chapter? No, second. I don't know. It was
Yeah.
years ago. Whenever. When she walks into the bar and Claire's at the bar, she's been there and Claire's been there, but you haven't. And so I have to, describe things, come up with like who, and I think it's to me like things that really make, I think it's the same too with building backstory. Like I think things that really make places feel real or people feel real is not like a big detail. It's the little details. It's the bartender behind the
Yeah.
bar whose name is such and such and has a tattoo of a woodpecker on his forearm. Like it's like little things that kind of to me really ground it and like this is an actual like, Schitt's Creek kind of kind of
Yeah.
place or something like that, like
Hmm.
where people actually live day to day and you can actually believe that this is what is happening. I mean, because even in like Nashville and New York and like in Iris, there's a lot of stuff happening in Portland as well. Like the actual places they go to, like I made those up too. There was
Hmm.
not an ampersand bar in Nashville. There was not an Empress Theater in Portland and that I put in Iris. Like there's, so um that's the fun about fiction is that I can take a real place even and then just insert things that make it feel even more accessible, I think, to the reader.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
like it
unique to
actually
those
is there.
characters. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. So
absolutely. So we're coming to the end of my personal questions, but before we move on to the rapid fire round, I'd love to just hear about what's next and what you're working on, Ramona Riley and beyond. Anything you want to share with what you're excited about?
yeah. So Dream on Ramona Riley is out in May 13th. Anybody on the West Coast, I'm gonna be heading west for those events in May. And it's my first like major celebrity romance. So Dylan the main character, the love interest is the daughter of like two 90s alternative music rock icons. Think Kurt Cobain and Courtney Page, not Courtney Page,
Hmm.
what's her name? Carrie Page is the name of the character. Courtney Love. Their daughter, Frances Bean Cobain, is kind of who
Hmm.
I loosely based her on. Um, though her father is still alive and well. I didn't want to get quite that traumatic. But anyway, so and she's like trying to make a name for herself, like kind of detach herself from all the people's expectations for her in Hollywood. She's an actress. She's acting in a rom-com that's being filmed in a small town called Clover Lake, where Ramona lives. Um, and they have kind of a history between them as well. So they, collide again and all that kind of good stuff. Um, the romantic comedy that she is starring in is based on a book by Iris Kelly. So little kind of so same universe, just
Mm-hmm.
and Iris may or may not make an appearance at some point. Um
Can't wait.
and then, so then the book I'm writing right now is called Get Over It, April Evans, and that is Ramona's best friend. She is quite a challenge. She is a triple Scorpio. Uh
Jesus.
yeah. So I don't know why I make these decisions. But because I'm making it all up. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, but
Excellent
she
use of free will. Excellent use of free
yes.
will.
But that book is actually a trope that I don't even know if it's a trope because I don't see it very often. Um, because I think you really would have to be it would definitely have to be a queer relationship for it to even be possible. But anyway, the trope is the ex of my ex. So kind of a thing going there. But anyway, it's been fun. It's been a challenge. I'm wrapping that up. That should be out maybe I think February of 26th is when that comes out. And then there should be one more book after that with I believe will be my first non-binary main character.
Amazing.
In the
Can't
third
wait to
one,
hear
yeah,
more
who
about
is
that.
not introduced until April's book, that
Got
that
it.
character. So they are not in Ramona's book. But yeah, so that's what's going on for me.
You're
So yeah.
you're busy.
Yeah, I'm busy. But
Love
that's
it.
good. I like it. I like to be busy with that kind of stuff. So,
Amazing. Okay, rapid fire round. What are you currently reading?
I'm actually currently reading The Box in the Woods by Maureen Johnson.
Oh, I've
So,
heard of that.
yeah, I actually don't read a ton of YA anymore, but I'm just like I was just really I years ago I read Truly Devious. So if you haven't read Truly Devious and you like mysteries,
Mhm.
it is so friggin' good. That whole series, Maureen Johnson is just brilliant in my opinion, but that whole series is great. And this is like kind of like the fourth book that's like let's like same characters, but it's not the same mystery that the first three were about. Um, I think it came out maybe a couple years ago. But anyway, but I just was like over the holidays, I was like, yeah, these books. And so that's what I'm reading right now.
I love that. And then what's a book you recommend everyone to read?
Okay, so since this is a romance thing, it's not sapphic, but it is probably one of the best romances I've ever in my life read. It's called The Art of Scandal by Regina Black.
Ooh.
Um, it is amazing. A Black MC. She is just, oh, like Regina is just an amazing writer and an amazing person. So it's basically about a woman whose husband sends her a dick pic, not intended for her. Like, and she's like, I don't think you meant this for me. And so that kind of heralds in like she's like, okay, well, we need to get a divorce because you're having an affair. But he's running for governor. So he said and she like doesn't have a lot of money on her own. She has a kid from like another man who she needs to support. And he's like, I'll pay you $1 million if you stay with me through the gubernatorial race. And she's like, okay. But then she falls in love with like this younger artist, like this Latino artist who's like way younger than her. And it is so good. It is so
This
good. So
sounds
yes.
so good. I'm
Yeah.
gagged.
Yeah.
I love the drama, the intrigue,
Yes.
the
It's so good.
scandal.
Yeah.
What is a book coming out soon that you're excited to read?
Oh gosh. Oh, I'm so visual. I don't know. Um, there was one that I remember seeing on Instagram, and I feel like I'm not gonna remember the name. So maybe I'll just find another one. Um, God, what was it called? I don't know. I can't remember.
That's okay.
Anyway, Kennedy Ryan's next one in
Oh,
her series that everybody adores actually comes out the same day as Ramona in May. So that's good.
amazing. May
Yeah.
13th. It's also my mom's birthday. It's just generally a
Hey,
great
there
day.
you go. That's great.
If you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh gosh. Ooh, dead or alive. Wow.
You could
Uh,
also have a little dinner party if you want to put two people in
yeah.
conversation with one another.
Hmm. I'd really love like get some like Josephine Baker. Some like
Yes.
Gertrude Stein, maybe. Just have like a little like, what was it like being queer when like it was really,
Hmm.
you know, back then and yeah, so that'd be cool.
Love
Just
that.
hang out on the left bank with a bunch of like artists, queer
No,
artists from the
literally.
20s and 30s and 40s.
Just like the Parisian Sapphic, like literary salons.
Yes,
Um,
be
Favorite
amazing.
class you took at university if you went?
Oh gosh, I did, but I was a religion major. Okay,
Really?
so oh yeah, it's bad, it's bad. I mean, it was academic religion. It wasn't like Christian religion. It was like an actual academic study of it, but still, it was not a good decision. But I got a BA and I moved on. Um, but I did minor in psychology, and I remember taking a class. I think it was called like the psychology of women, and it was just basically like about, the psychology of like the feminist movement and women's rights and
Mm,
just kind of all of that kind of stuff. So it was very, very interesting. I remember my
love
professor
that.
being very hot. So,
I was a gender and sexuality studies major, and I had
yes.
crushes on like half of my professors. Yeah, relatable.
Yeah.
Um,
She was like hugely pregnant when I took the class, and I would like, oh, at the end of class, I'd always be like, "Can I carry your bag and your books to your office?" Of course, I didn't know why I was doing it this time because I was completely repressed. Um, but
I'm obsessed. I feel like you need to write some sort of academic
yeah,
romance in your
maybe.
future, maybe. Favorite queer movie or TV show, and or TV
Oh,
show.
oh gosh. Okay. She-Ra and the Princess of the Power. 100%. Schitt's Creek is a big favorite of mine. Um, movie is hard because all every time I think of like a queer movie, I'm like Happiest Season and it was terrible and heartbreaking.
I
Um,
still haven't seen
so
it. I'm scared.
oh, don't just
Yeah,
don't.
cool.
I mean, other
Cool.
than the people in it being hot, it's just like
True.
no. Um, yeah, so definitely those two.
Love.
Yeah.
Um, Also, you mentioned Shira. The last book we read was Heretic by Gina Cadlick. Have you read that?
Mm. Mm-mm.
It's her memoir of leaving the evangelical church, and
Oh wow.
she talks about Christianity and Shira and how they relate.
Oh my
And
gosh. I'm gonna have to
based
read
on
that.
what we've talked about, I think you should read it. I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved it so much. Okay, last rapid fire question. Favorite queer person to follow on social media?
Oh gosh.
Or is a lesbian? Favorite
I
queer
have a
celebrity?
weird thing. I really don't follow a ton of celebrities because I feel I like seeing things going on in my social media that are actually people I know and
Yeah,
like relate to. So I feel I do follow a couple though. So I think one I do follow, I do believe I follow Renee Rapp. Um
love her.
I think obviously I think Chapel's on there, maybe Billie Eilish. It's mostly musicians
Yeah,
that I
the
usually
pop
end up being
princesses of our
obsessed with.
day. Yeah,
Yes.
100%.
So yeah.
Alrighty. So we have a few questions in the chat. So if anyone else has
Yeah.
any questions for Ashley, we have some time to answer them. Let's see. Someone says, might I suggest a holiday romance? LOL, if you don't want to do another, or not holiday,
Um,
Halloween. I can't
oh
read,
yes. I mean,
apparently.
I definitely have thought about doing like a witchy something or other, but I'm very bad at magic systems. And even though you're making it all up and it has to like, and even if it's like a fluffy witchy romance, there has to be some sort of
Yeah,
magic system that will
the
make
the
sense. And I am
skeleton has to
just,
be the magic system in a
yes,
sense.
I
Yeah.
am bad at that. Like I read like if you've ever read Lana Harper's Thistle
So
Grove
good.
series, it's so good, but like every time I read one, I'm like, don't think of this. Like she like, oh, anyway, yeah, so good.
Christina asks, how does your chronological writing style apply to the flashbacks and backstory? Did you write all the flashbacks first or write them as they came up in the book? That's a great question.
Yeah. I write them as they came up in the book. I mean, there's definitely probably times where I was like, oh, I need another one, and I would go back and add it in. But most of the time, it's like, they're talking about something, and like, because there's like a setup for a flashback.
Hmm.
They have to kind of be talking about they themselves or something that's relevant, and then it's like, okay, here's a good spot. And I didn't want to overwhelm the book with flashbacks either, so I kind
Yeah.
of had to like balance like how many do we really need. I needed enough so that the reader understood their past relationship and where they were coming from, and sometimes it would just be like a little paragraph of like she remembered when they would blah 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 blah. um and
Yeah.
sometimes it'd be longer, sometimes
Hmm.
like I think when the day that they actually of their wedding, that was actually like two full chapters that were just
Yeah. Yeah,
100%
it
flashback.
was.
um and I have, and I've done that in other books too, so it just kind of depended on what the story needed.
Yeah,
It
love
was
that.
mostly chronological, linear.
Savannah asks, how slash why did you settle on the most extreme type of breakup slash betrayal for Charlotte and Brighton? Did you always know it was going to be a left at the altar situation, or was it ever something less intense?
It was never something less intense. I think I just once I settled on, okay, I think I want to try a second chance, I was like, I wanted to do something that I hadn't really read before.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it was actually really not fun necessarily, but challenging or motivating to try to make it like, okay, this is like the messiest thing. That's I also just tend towards mess. Like I'm just like I
Chaos.
want to, yeah, I just as messy. I mean, like the messiest character I've ever written is Dylan Monroe and Dream on Ramona Raleigh. Like she is a disaster, and to a point to where some people are not going to like her, and that's okay. Um, but I like that. I like reading about people who are just completely fucked up and have no idea what they're doing and who they are, and somehow find their way. Not only because that's what I like about that's how I write my romances because that's what I like to read about. I like to read about two people falling in love, yes, but I want to read too about a person falling in love with themselves and
Mm,
figuring out who they are as an individual before. That's why I mean, I could do an entire Zoom session on the third act breakup, but I'm a fan of the third act
mm,
breakup for that reason. Because usually my characters are such disasters that they need something to understand, like I am not ready for this. I'm going to go over here and figure my shit out. And then I'm going to be able to love you and
hmm.
myself better.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm fine. I'm fine with not third act breakups too. But that's why I do them, um, repeatedly. Is because I feel like my characters usually need it. It's not usually so simple as we love each other and the conflict is this other thing we're dealing with. Usually, the conflict is it is the storm within,
Internal.
and so
Yeah.
yeah. And so, for this one, I was just like, well, that's the messiest thing I can think of. Let's see if I can pull it off. So that's just kind of where that came from. Yeah.
Amazing. Um,
Yeah.
One of the hats that I make for Sapph-Lit merch says disaster bisexual, and I feel like your characters are very much
Yeah.
disaster
Of
bisexuals
course.
in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
Um,
All of them. Yeah.
Harlow says, how did you balance the subplots with Adele and Sloane with the main plot? And why did you decide to add the subplots with Adele's identity and Sloane's romance with Wes and friendship with Charlotte?
Um, so if this was a series, I'd obviously be developing characters who I was going to develop even more in the next book. But Bright Falls was my first standalone. I mean, my first series. So all of my YA and middle grade before that, they were never series. They were all standalones. And so that's always been really important to me is to develop side characters so that they feel real.
Mhm.
Particularly if they're marginalized characters. I want to be very careful to not put them in a box and to make them have their own flaws, their own wishes, their own dreams, their own issues. Obviously, those aren't going to be developed to the extent that my main characters are, but I think that is just a way to make the reading experience more enjoyable is to make your side characters feel like they are just as real as the main characters. And plus, it makes the arc of the main characters not easier, but more believable as well, in my opinion, because a lot of Charlotte's issues were the fact that she did not know how to be a friend. She did not know how to open up to people. And so I had to play that off Sloane. And obviously, Sloane is a human being and she's going to react to those things.
Yeah.
Um, and with Wes, who I love, I think, if you're coming back into a hometown where Sloane and Adele have both grown up, they're going to have some history there. It's not a huge town. There's going to be people that they know. There's going to be, things that they have experienced. And I thought West was a great way to kind of tie Charlotte and Sloane together. Um, and then Adele, she just felt like she was Arrow. And I just wanted to kind of put that on the page. And I wanted her to have something, she was much more chill than Sloane, and she wasn't dealing with all the friendship issues with Brighton, obviously, as Charlotte
Hmm.
and Sloane were. But I definitely wanted her to have something that made her feel like a three-dimensional character.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Dakota asks, do you have any tip for someone writing their first sapphic romance book?
Why? No, I'm just kidding. Not about the Sabbath part, just about writing at all. No, I'm just kidding. I love writing. It is hard though. So kudos to you for even trying. Um, I would just say just keep going. That's kind of something that you have to figure out as you're going along is what is your process. Like I've talked about how my process is very inner editor, but a lot of people, especially if you're first starting out, it is good to just word vomit it all out. Um, so perseverance, just keep writing, even if it's bad. You might not know how to fix it right away, and you don't have to. Just keep going. Um, and read a lot. Read the kind of writing, the kind of books that you want to write, and that you want to kind of see on in your own style, and that's kind of how you figure that out. I would also say community. If you don't have any writer friends around you, please get some, because there are or try to get some on online. That's I've met all of mine online. And so because if you don't have writers, it's really difficult to do all the things I just said, to persevere, to keep going. Um, Especially, like I've been doing this long enough to where it's almost like I know I'm going to figure out the answer. I still might bounce it off my friends. I may not take their advice, but until you really come into like kind of figuring out who your identity is as an author and what your style is, what your process is, other people are going to keep you sane. Um, Bouncing ideas off of them, talking through plot problems with them, just talking about like how hard it is and how like frustrating it is, especially if you then go into across the line from being writer to an author and you're dealing with agenting and querying and then publishing, because publishing is a vast wilds of insanity that
True.
nobody understands unless you are in it. Like, I mean, how many times I've like talked to my own therapist and she's like, and I'm like, yeah, I know.
It's the
Um,
Wild West out there.
it is
It's so
Westworld.
weird.
And so it's
Yeah.
just like you need community. So that's actually honestly the first thing. And then all the other things kind of follow from that, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. Clara says Sapph-Lit writing group. Honestly, as someone who needs like 20,000 words more in my debut novel, yes, please, let's start a Sapph-Lit
Well,
writing
yeah, they're
group.
out there. I mean, they're
They're
out
out
there.
there.
So yeah.
Um, Last question we have from Megan. I love how much you include astrology when talking about your characters. When did you first get into astrology, and is that always something you use when building your characters and their personalities?
It is, and apparently I can't write a book without putting it in there. Like it's just like apps. Like I realized that it's even as far back as my first middle grade. I think that's when I first started it. Ivy Aberdeen's Letter to the World has something in there. I forgot what it is even now, but someone has a tarot card and does something with tarot. Um, and then I think just as I started getting more into it and understanding like my own signs like more and kind of delving into that, it just well, first of all, it's just so queer. And second of all, it's like it is a I'm not religious. I am spiritual in that way. And it has given me a lot of insight. So I use it a lot to figure out my characters. I mean, and it's even more like April in the Ramona series is absolutely obsessed with astrology. So it's like a very big thing, even more in the upcoming books. So, but yeah, I think it's also, even if you didn't put it in books, I know writers sometimes use astrology to even like create characters. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
well, this one's going to be a Libra, what is she gonna be like, or what are they gonna, what's their
She's
personality
going to
gonna
be a
gonna be
grudge
like?
holder, that's for sure.
Exactly. Well, I'm a Scorpio moon, so I'm also a grudge holder.
Yeah, wait, what's your
Um,
big three? Tell me.
Aries sun,
Hmm.
Scorpio moon, and Gemini rising. So
Wow. I
yeah,
love Aries. My
yeah.
best friend is an Aries. Libra sun, Pisces moon, Sag rising. So I say I'm impulsive yet
Okay.
indecisive and emotional about
Yeah.
all of it. It's a mess out here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I just actually talked to a new friend the other day and she said, "Oh, well, your Gemini rising tells me," she's like, "not that you're two-faced, because I know better than that, but that you spent a lot of time in your past not understanding who you really were because you were too busy playing chameleon for everyone around you." And I was just like, I said, I was like, yeah,
yeah,
being a conservative Christian with a Gemini rising was a party, let me tell you.
you really need to read Heretic by Gina Cadlick
Okay,
because she's also
I'll
very
read it.
spiritual and talks a lot about tarot and her tarot practice in the book. Um, it's so good. I think you'll really love it.
Yeah.
Um, everyone's like a
Yeah.
Gemini sun who had a Christian era. I feel that.
Yeah. I
Gemini who
mean,
didn't realize I was bi.
and I honestly, like, this is literally 2 days ago, until she said that, I was just like, oh my God. It's like
No,
I'm in therapy.
literally.
I was like, okay,
No, you're going to
I
be pulled up
understand
to your
now.
next therapy session. Like, so my friend said this thing, and I need to
Yeah.
unpack all of that.
Yeah. I'm just like, oh, wow. And it's funny
Amazing.
because the book I'm writing right now, actually,
Hmm.
April's love interest, Daphne, has religious trauma. Hers is way more than mine. Like talking like she was the daughter of a pastor in a small Tennessee town. Literally left when she was 18 and didn't look back. Um, so I actually put that in the book about how she's a Gen because like April's like guessing her signs. And I was like, you know what? That's really smart. I'm gonna put that in there.
Oh my
Um,
God.
so yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's proof that everything that people say to you can be used as copy. Everything is copy.
Oh yeah. And I
Yeah.
don't often put actual I think this is actually maybe the first time I've ever put like an actual conversation in a book. Like I'll take like little quirks sometimes with people's permission, but and obviously I didn't do word for word here, but I took the idea of it and I was like, "Oh, well, that makes a
I'm
lot of
taking
sense."
that. I
Yeah.
cannot wait to read it.
So,
Um, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us. Is there
yeah, thank you for
anything
having
you
me.
want to say to the Sapph-Liddies or anything that we didn't talk about that you just want to share before we go?
I mean, I don't think so, but thank you for having me and thank you for reading and buying and requesting and sharing queer books. We need it even more now than ever. So, yeah.
So true.
Thank you.
So true. Thank you, everyone. We will be on Zoom in an hour to have our private book club discussion. So make sure to join us then. And I hope everyone has an amazing rest of your day. Thank you again, Ashley.
All right, thanks.
All right. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.